Honey, we have some things to talk about. Hello. Welcome back to the Madiswan channel. This is another one of my one-off videos that I've been just doing, one of my one-off pop culture videos. And I just wanted to talk about something that's been really pressing heavy on me. Now, full disclosure, this is a re-record. If we're being honest, the audio on my other one was really effed up. So I had to re-record no matter what. But while I was editing the first part of what I recorded, I just like what I felt then is not what I feel now. The price yesterday is not the price today. You know what I mean? And I'm recording this after the election results, a week after the election results. I'm recording this after there was a very deliberate social media campaign demonizing Black men, particularly for this election. And I just want to sit here and take full accountability. When I was watching myself back on that first video, I was very emotional. And I don't want to, my emotions are valid, but I don't want to create commentary content where my emotions run the show. And I am not above anyone else, but the propaganda was getting to me. There was a lot of things that were coming out pre-election that were very negative towards Black men and their mentality that was really weighing on me. So my tone was a lot harsher than I wanted it to be. Just for full disclosure, this is going to be a call in, not a call out. We are going to talk about Durk's case. This is not going to be a documentary or a breakdown about Durk's case at all. Durk is but a jumping off point. This is more of a state of a culture video discussing Black men, hip hop culture, what it's promoting, and what we kind of need to grow out of and get into. You know what I'm saying? Especially during these times post-election. What the election results told me, the statistics of the election told me, is that Black men and Black women are pretty much one band, one sound. There are a few outliers, those we know, child, but we are pretty much one band, one sound when it comes to life and social shit. I obviously understand that not everyone voted for Kamala. I know that there's a lot of reasons not to vote for Kamala. I've been making a lot of political content critiquing Kamala's campaign, for sure. There's a lot. But what those statistics told me is that not only is there always, every election cycle, a deliberate effort by the DNC to demonize Black men when they were never the problem, but it's used as a scapegoat in order to distract us from the real issues that surround us in the Black community. What I saw from that was the statistics were very telling. And a lot of people are saying a lot of things about the election, about Kamala, about Trump. What I will say is there's a lot of issues with the DNC and their campaign that they ran. That being said, though, those statistics came out and I realized that there was a concerted effort by the DNC to drive a wedge between Black men and Black women for some strange reason, which I don't really understand why they went that route when if all of the Black men who voted and all of the Black women voted and they all voted for Kamala, they quite literally wouldn't have changed any of the results. This is overwhelmingly what the American people wanted. So, you break it, you buy it, you get what you paid for, and that's just kind of what it is. But I say all that to say my perspective, the lens that I'm looking through to film this video on the 11th of November versus when I filmed this video like 2 weeks ago is completely different. And not completely, but very different. The tone is different. The content will stay the same. And I just want to say that this is a refilm. This is completely transparent. This is completely real. And it's just time for us to really, as a community, build our solidarity amongst takes each other back. It's time for us to begin to really lean on each other, really trust each other, and really show up for each other and support each other. It's time for us to start promoting the things that we should promote. It's time for us to stop falling into the traps that white supremacy constantly puts out there for our community. And I feel like this Lil Durk situation is a perfect jumping off point because it leads to a bunch of social issues that I don't know if we as a Black community are ready to talk about. Now, me personally, I never was into Durk's music. I'm a little older than his average demographic. What I used to listen to, who I used to listen to, was Chief Keef. Okay, like, I can't believe that's 12 years ago. Look at this, 12 years ago. Oh my God, I'm getting old, people. But I was a Chief Keef girl. I liked all his older stuff. Obviously, Love Sosa was iconic. Don't Like, loved that. Another one, Earned It. The beep went off. I love that song. But I was a Chief Keef girl. That was like, when it comes to Chicago, when it comes to the politicking, when it comes to the music that came out of that specific time period, I was a Chief Keef girl. So I'm on the older end of that time period, if that makes sense. Like, clearly, Chief Keef is the starter of this shit. So I wasn't really familiar with Lil Durk, his music, his songs or anything, but I just knew he was super popular. I only knew King Von for songs like The O. From the stripper bitch, she from Cake and Cheese, call a Glock with a ruler clip, but don't play with me, this bitch a hoe. Okay, you get what I mean. I knew this song from King Von, and I literally have no Lil Durk music that I have saved. I have no Lil Durk music in my iTunes at all, which is like extremely rare for me. Like, I'm not one of those. I mean, I know how I talk, I know how I present, but when it comes to music, assume that I'm listening to the most explicit, the most violent, the most aggressive rap music I can find. Just assume that. It's been healing me a lot through this time period that we're going through, thinking about our future as a community and this country. But there's something about very visceral, very real music that gets me in a specific type of mood. One of my favorite female rap artists is Stunna Girl. I love music like that. My pussy fat, I'm the finest bitch in the room, the confidence. That's the type of music I fuck with. That's the type of music that's in me. Sexy Red, another person that I do enjoy. You know, when people say like, oh, these people who are making music like this are ruining the Black community, I shut the fuck up because I am one of those people that loves that music. That being said, I'm grown as hell. I'm almost 30. I'm 28. I will be 29 in January. So I take this music with a grain of salt. Like, I'm not listening to this music with impressionable ears. I'm listening to this music to just vibe, you know, and feel confident and strong and all of those things. I'm not listening to this music to get tips. I'm not listening to this music to feel like I'm cool. I am cool. I'm the coolest bitch walking. I don't need this music to feel that way. But a lot of younger people see these people who become famous, how they become famous, what they talk about, what they do in their real life, and they try to emulate that. These people came out at a time where I was too grown to feel impressionable by it, but I can recognize that this type of music has had an effect on our youth. I don't think that's wrong to say. I also want to warn y'all that we are going to be walking a razor's edge with this video. On this channel, multiple things can be very, very true at the same time. On one hand, I can say, I love this music. There's a place for this music. I value this music. And I don't agree with people living in a respectability politic world that look down on people who make this music or people who like this music. But at the same time, we have to also be able to communicate to the youth that these are experiences that they're sharing, and hyping this up as cool, relatable, or something that you should be doing is also not safe or productive for our community. And I think as the body counts rise, there's a rise of galaxy gas, there's a rise of, just violence that's turning inward towards us. I think it's time that we have a bit of a call in, not a call out, to the Black men in our community. This is coming from someone who loves you. This is coming from someone who loves the Black men in her life, loves Black men in general, will always have love for Black men. But honey, we are only as strong as our weakest link. And at this point, statistically, y'all are kind of our weakest link. I'm just keeping it a bean. So come to the front. We're going to have a conversation about Durk. We're going to have a conversation about hip hop. We're going to have a conversation about community, period. So let's talk about it. This is my personal opinion when it comes to Black men currently, because this is how you guys in the media are being portrayed. And it's been like this for years. But there has been a recent indictment on hip hop. Like, close your eyes and think about how many Fed cases have been dropped like bombs on the hip hop community in the past 10 years. It can be high profile, it can be medium profile, it can be smaller offenses with the feds, but think about how many you've seen just come across your Instagram timeline in the past 10 years. It's been a lot. And I think as these indictments continue to stack up, we have to question who we give money to. We have to question who, how the Black community is being represented, unfortunately. And we have to question the why. How is this happening? What is going on? And we also have to question how that seeps into Black men and their hypermasculinity, how that seeps into things like the Black manosphere, how that seeps into Black woman femicide, how that seeps into activism and all of that. So that's kind of what this video is going to be about. Now, obviously, I think it was 2 months ago, Lil Durk got arrested. He got arrested for a murder for hire case. Let's see if I can find an article that'll quickly kind of summarize, what's going on. So, okay, so let's do this. I don't love Vulture, but we're going to talk about it. Okay. So Lil Durk was arrested for murder for hire on October 25th over the 2022 killing of rapper Quando Rondo's cousin, Lil Pab. 5 members of Durk's group, OTF, were also arrested in what prosecutors allege was a revenge plot for the 2020 murder of King Von. Now, Durk has been charged with additional felony counts. Now, obviously, we know this. Lil Durk was basically trying to evade getting arrested. He had booked several different flights and he was about to go on one. And that's when the feds caught him at the airport. And he has been booked since October 25th. So it's almost been a month. And a lot has come out, especially on the heels of the Young Thug trial and the shit show that was. Obviously, we all saw it for our own eyes. And now we know that, Young Thug has 15 years probation, which is a lot more reduced than a life sentence. You know what I mean? He had the case, the way the state handled that case was a full bungle. But there's a lot to be said about these constant cases that keep getting slapped down with our rappers in the rap community in the hip hop space, particularly RICO charges and stuff like that. This idea that the music is a front for criminal activity, and that's kind of what's being alleged with Lil Durk. Obviously, there has been some sort of alleging that one of the people closest to him had been wearing a wire for some time, and basically, people are saying this is a done deal. Unfortunately, in terms of Lil Durk's case, fortunately or unfortunately, we'll get into that. We're walking a razor's edge, right? I appreciate gangsters and I appreciate gang culture. I think there is a value for it and there is a need for it. I think that ultimately a lot of people look at gangs for what they are now, not how they started and what they were intended to be like, and how the people in the community feel about the gangs. I think somewhere in the Black community, the plot got lost for what a gang is supposed to be like. I've always loved mafia movies. I've always loved shit about the mob. That's one of my hyperfixations in my private time. And even though they were extremely violent in the Italian mob, they made sure to give back to the community. They made sure to fit in between where society kind of let this group of people who were marginalized, left them to kind of rot and die, fit in to help people in their community in the places that our society kind of pushed them to the margins and pushed them to the side. And that's, I think, true for all gangs. Gangs don't come out of random, like people just want to start gangs. People start gangs out of necessity to protect their community, as a necessity to feed their families, as a necessity to be able to have some sort of upward mobility or protecting force within their community. There is a wonderful documentary, which I will play the trailer to, called Bloods and Crips Made in America. This used to be on Netflix for free a long time. Trailer. And this doc is essentially a doc talking about the Bloods and Crips, where they came from, their origin story, specifically in South Central Los Angeles. Now, Bloods and Crips are some of the most famous gangs, black gangs to exist, right? And when you watch this doc, which I highly recommend because it is good, you understand the history of those gangs and what time in history they came out of. I'll play the trailer and I'll explain more.
Make no doubt about it. This is civil war right here.
One of the longest running wars in the history of this country.
There can always be someone outside that's ready to kill me because of where I live at.
We go over there and kill one of them, and they come over and kill one of us.
Like you're going into it, you can't dodge, run away, and get out of this. This is what it is.
You have people of the same ethnic makeup murdering each other at epidemic proportions, and no one is noticing.
They ran them down, they chased them down, they hunted them down, they murdered everybody that they could, and made everybody else either go to exile or they locked them up in the penitentiary. And when all that was over with, a new element rose up called the Crips.
Yeah. West side of us is Bloods, on the inside of us is Crips. We're just surrounded in a box.
See, the ingredient is to care about people and to love them. Understand that they are human. They're not gang members, they're human beings.
You open them up, there will be a stamp under their shirt that says Made in America. Not no place else. They weren't made in Taiwan or Indonesia. They were made in America.
Okay. First of all, highly recommend watching it. It's really fucking good. Like, it's really fucking good. Seriously. Maybe I can do a movie reaction to it on my Substack if you guys are interested. But what you get from this trailer is very important, right? Black people in America are not supposed to exist, right? I don't think people like sit with that reality at all. We are being actively hunted as a community. There is an active genocide against Black Americans in this country, very obviously and very deliberately. But we are not supposed to be here, let alone thrive here. And yet we remain. And that's why when they were talking about how before the Bloods came into the picture, before the Crips came into the picture, before these gangs were formed, there was activism in our community, right? There was education in our community. There was people leading our people with options. You know, if you weren't into Martin Luther King or organizing under that, you were into Malcolm X or organizing under the Black Panthers. There was a flash pan of incredible Black intellectuals in that like 1950s through the 1970s phase. Black intellectuals who were pushing our issue and making it known on a national stage what Black people demanded, what we contributed to this country, how we were being mistreated, and real strides were taken. Real steps were taken in the right direction. Now, some people say the integration thing was a mistake. I low-key agree, high-key agree, but we can't go back in time to fix that, you know? But what you saw in this trailer was the United States government actively hunted all of those leaders that were leading change, progressive change for all, for American society, but centering the Black community that was nonviolent in its nature-ish, not really as aggressive as something like the Crips, right? And you have to understand that the people who started these gangs were people who were alive watching Martin Luther King get assassinated, watching Malcolm X get assassinated, watching, you know, Huey go to jail, watching Assata Shakur getting exiled to Cuba, watching Angela Davis fight for her life against the FBI and win, but still, you know what I'm saying? These are things that I don't think we understand in terms of our legacy of fighting to exist in this country, how it gets passed down. Like, the 60s were a very unique time for Black activism and Black revolutionary work. But the way that the state stamped out any hope of that progressing, would rather murder all of our leaders, all of the people that really had a hold on the Black community and our mentality. Instead of working with them, instead of listening, they killed them, they jailed them, they exiled them. So what do you think? Facing a world that fundamentally doesn't see you as human, facing a society that used to enslave people like you, and you watching as you're growing up, all the people that your parents admire, that you admire, all the people speaking breath and life and positivity into your community, actually taking the time to volunteer that time and put it into the community, all of them are being hunted by the state. And you watch them in real time all be successfully exiled, jailed, or hunted by the state, or called terrorists by the state. How does that make you feel? Then after that, there's Vietnam. Then after that, there's a war on drugs. Then after that, you know, the chemical weapon of crack is placed into your community, specifically in South Central LA. And if you believe what I believe, the CIA was behind that. So it's thing after thing after thing after thing. You slap on Reaganomics, you slap on any kind of Xing out of upward mobility or ability to even maintain what little you do have. Then comes desperation. Then comes hate. Then comes the need to at least be able to aggressively protect yourself in your community. And out of those circumstances creates the perfect foundation for gangs. The alternate economy, the alternate motive, the alternate society, right? A lot of people in Los Angeles, and I grew up in the Los Angeles County area, but I wasn't necessarily close to South Central LA. A lot of people don't realize what's happening in South Central LA, even in greater Los Angeles. And it's because actively our society, our structural apparatus, our governmental system does not care whether we live or die. Right? There's an active genocide happening that's been happening since we were brought here. We're not supposed to be here. So the fact that the intense violence that has turned in on ourselves through governmental intervention in the negative sense to the point that here we are, you know what I mean, in 2024, turning in on ourselves, right? Killing ourselves, pressing our issue with ourselves, when in reality, it's always been one enemy, right? There's always been one, and it's America. And I love the title, Crips and Bloods Made in America, because it is American made. It is our American society born. The alternative is this. And that's why I enjoy gangs. I enjoy gang culture and I enjoy learning about it. I'm very much a civilian child, but I have more empathy towards people in gangs because realistically, when you go into these communities, what is the alternative? What is the alternative? And even though there's an inordinate amount of drugs, inordinate amount of violence against our own people, based to me on things that are pretty frivolous when it comes down to it, because at the end of the day, they're constructed issues created by the circumstances that the state has maintained and created for our community. At a point, you have to sit here and understand that they want us to do exactly this. This is what the state wants us to do. This is what the state has pushed us to do. And that's why we've been allowed to do it for so many years. So when you have people like Lil Durk, who statistically, generationally, was not supposed to make it as far as he did. He was not supposed to touch the money he touched. He was not supposed to have the experiences that he had. He was not supposed to be able to bring his family out of the circumstance. Generationally in America, if your father goes to jail, it's likely you're going to jail. If your mom was a teen mom, it's likely you're going to be a teen mom. If you were generationally poor, it is very likely that you are going to stay in poverty. That is literally what it means to have the odds stacked against you. And that was Durk's case. That was Durk's situation. And the fact that he was able to amass a following, cultivate a talent, touch millions of people, touch millions of dollars, and he still couldn't get his ass out of the streets, tells you that it's not just the societal structure that is a prison, it's the mind control. It's the pull and the lure of growing up in a situation like that pulls you in. That's why people say it's generational. That's why people say poverty is basically genetic, because it's the mindset that pulls you back into circumstances that he shouldn't have been even near. Frankly, and it makes me sad. You know, I think that we can say that if he did what he did, he deserves a free and fair trial. I don't know if he'll get it now with this country, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I can understand the danger and the fear and the victims' families and all of that attached to it. But at the same time, when you are actively in a gang and you're not necessarily a civilian, different rules apply and different emotions apply. And in Durk's case, he got the golden ticket. He made it out, and he sabotaged even that because of mentality that was born out of struggle and strife in situations like this, that he was not able to not necessarily healthily channeled just in the music. He still had to go back in the streets and do what he had to do, which makes me fucking sad, because that's a prison. Imagine having everything you could have imagined and still not being satisfied, and still needing to go to the streets, and still needing to bend to the will of a community of people that are telling you, you need to slide for this one, you need to slide for that one. And your fear of looking away, pushing you to lose everything. It's sad. Yeah. What I really also wanted to talk about in relation to this Durk thing, specifically, was the letter. So let me figure out how to type this. Okay. So the letter is a letter that came out in like 2012. Let me see. Anonymous, I can't spell, hip-hop letter about rap. I feel like that was horribly typed. Okay, here it is. All right, so this letter is titled "The Secret Meeting That Changed Rap Music and Destroyed a Generation." Now, this came out on this website on Tuesday, April 24th, 2012. And this underneath it, you see it says, "This anonymous letter landed in my inbox about a minute ago." Strap in. I'm about to read this. Let's go. Hello. After more than 20 years, I finally decided to tell the world what I witnessed in 1991, which I believe was one of the biggest turning points in popular music and ultimately American society. I have struggled for a long time weighing the pros and cons of making this story public, as I was reluctant to implicate the individuals who were present that day. So I've simply decided to leave out names and call the details that may risk my personal well-being and that of those who were, like me, dragged into something they weren't ready for. Between the late 1980s and the early 90s, I was what you would call a decision maker with one of the more established companies in the music industry. I came from Europe in the early 80s and quickly established myself in the business. The industry was different back then. Since technology and media weren't accessible to people like they are today, the industry had more control over the public and had the means to influence them in any way it wanted. This may explain why, in early 1991, I was invited to attend a closed-door meeting with a small group of music business insiders to discuss rap music's new direction. Little did I know that we would be asked to participate in one of the most unethical and destructive business practices I have ever seen. The meeting was held in a private residence on the outskirts of Los Angeles. I remember about 25 to 30 people being there, most of them familiar faces. Speaking to those I knew, we joked about the theme of the meeting, as many of us did not care for rap music and failed to see the purpose of being invited to a private gathering to discuss its future. Among the attendees was a small group of unfamiliar faces who stayed to themselves and made no attempt to socialize beyond their circle. Based on their behavior and formal appearances, they didn't seem to be in our industry. Our casual chatter was interrupted when we were asked to sign a confidentiality agreement, preventing us from publicly discussing the information presented during the meeting. Needless to say, this intrigued and in some cases disturbed many of us. The agreement was only a page long but very clear on the matter and consequences, which stated that violating the terms would result in job termination. We asked several people what this meeting was about and the reason for such secrecy, but couldn't find anyone who had answers for us. A few people refused to sign and walked out. No one stopped them. I was tempted to follow, but curiosity got the best of me. A man who was part of the unfamiliar group collected the agreements from us. Quickly after the meeting began, one of my industry colleagues, who shall remain nameless, like everyone else, thanked us for attending. He then gave the floor to a man who only introduced himself by his first name and gave no further details about his personal background. I think he was the owner of the residence, but it was never confirmed. He briefly praised all of us for the success we had achieved in our industry and congratulated us for being selected as part of this small group of decision makers. At this point, I began to feel slightly uncomfortable with the strangeness of this gathering. The subject quickly changed as the speaker went to tell us about the respective companies we represented had invested in a very profitable industry, which would become even more rewarding with our active involvement. He explained that the companies we work for had invested millions into the building of privately owned prisons and that our positions of influence in the industry would actually impact the profitability of these investments. I remember many of us in the group immediately looking at each other in confusion. At the time, I didn't know what a private prison was, but I wasn't the only one. Sure enough, someone asked what these prisons were and what any of this had to do with us. We were told that these prisons were built by privately owned companies who receive funding from the government based on the number of inmates. The more inmates, the more money the government would pay these prisons. It was also made clear to us that since these prisons were privately owned, as they became publicly traded, we'd be able to buy shares. Most of us were taken aback by this. Again, a couple of people asked what this had to do with us. At this point, my industry colleague who had first opened the meeting took the floor again and answered our questions. He told us that since our employers had become silent investors in this prison business, it was now in their interest to make sure that these prisons remained filled. Our job would be to help make this happen by marketing music, which promotes criminal behavior, rap being the music of choice. He assured us that this would be a great situation for us because rap music was becoming an increasingly profitable market for our companies. And as employees, we would also be able to buy personal stocks in these prisons. Immediately, silence came over the room. You could have heard a pin drop. I never looked I remember looking around to make sure I wasn't dreaming and saw half the people with dropped jaws. My daze was interrupted when someone shouted, "Is this a fucking joke?" At this point, things became chaotic. Two of the men who were part of the unfamiliar group grabbed the man who shouted out and attempted to remove him from the house. A few of us, myself included, tried to intervene. One of them pulled out a gun and we all backed off. They separated us from the crowd and all four of us were escorted outside. My industry colleague who had opened the meeting earlier hurried out to meet us and reminded us that we had signed an agreement and would suffer the consequences of speaking about this publicly, or even those who attended the meeting, or even with those who attended the meeting. I asked him why he was involved with something this corrupt, and he replied that it was bigger than the music business and nothing we'd want to challenge without risking consequences. We all protested as he walked back into the house. I remembered word for word the last thing he said: "It's out of my hands now. Remember, you signed an agreement." He then closed the door behind him. The men rushed us to the cars and actually watched till we drove off. A million things were going through my mind as I drove away, and I eventually decided to pull over and park on a side street in order to collect my thoughts. I replayed everything in my mind repeatedly, and it all seemed very surreal to me. I was angry with myself for not having taken a more active role in questioning what had been presented to us. I'd like to believe that the shock of it all was what suspended my better nature. After what seemed like an eternity, I was able to calm myself enough to make it home. I didn't talk or call anyone that night. The next day back at the office, I was visibly out of it, but blamed it on being under the weather. No one else in my department had been invited to the meeting, and I felt a sense of guilt for not being able to share what I had witnessed. I thought about contacting the three others who were kicked out of the house, but I didn't remember their names and thought that tracking them down would probably bring unwanted attention. I considered speaking out publicly at the risk of losing my job, but I realized I'd probably be jeopardizing more than my job, and I wasn't willing to risk anything happening to my family. I thought about those men with guns and wondered who they were. I'd been told this was bigger than the music business, and all I could do was let my imagination run free. There were no answers and no one to talk to. I tried to do a little bit of research on private prisons, but didn't uncover anything about the music business's involvement. However, the information I did find confirmed how dangerous this prison business really was. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Eventually, it was as if the meeting had never taken place. It all seemed surreal. I became more reclusive and stopped going to any industry events unless professionally obligated to do so. On 2 occasions, I found myself attending the same function as my former colleague. Both times, our eyes met, but nothing more was exchanged. As the months passed, rap music had definitely changed direction. I was never a fan of it, but even I could tell the difference. Rap acts that talked about politics or harmless fun were quickly fading away as gangster rap started dominating the airwaves. Only a few months had passed since the meeting, but I suspect that the ideas presented that day had been successfully implemented. It was as if the order had been given to all major label executives. The music was climbing the charts, and most companies were more than happy to capitalize on it. Each one was churning out their own gangster rap acts on an assembly line. Everyone bought into it, consumers included. Violence and drug use became a central theme in most rap music. I spoke to a few of my peers in the industry to get their opinions on the new trend, but was told repeatedly that it was all about supply and demand. Sadly, many of them even expressed that the music reinforced their prejudice against minorities. I officially quit the music business in 1993, but my heart had already left months before. I broke ties with the majority of my peers and removed myself from this thing I had once loved. I took some time off, returned to Europe for a few years, settled out of state, and lived a quiet life away from the world of entertainment. As the years passed, I managed to keep my secret, fearful of sharing it with the wrong person, but also a little ashamed of not having had the balls to blow the whistle. But as rap got worse, my guilt grew. Fortunately, in the late 90s, having the internet as a resource, which wasn't at my disposal in the early days, made it easier for me to investigate what is now labeled the prison industrial complex. Now that I have a greater understanding of how private prisons operate, things make much more sense than they ever have. I see how the criminalization of rap music played a big part in promoting racial stereotypes and misguided so many impressionable young minds into adopting these glorified criminal behaviors, which often led to incarceration. 20 years of guilt is a heavy load to carry, but the least I can do now is share my story, hoping that fans of rap music realize how they've been used for the past 2 decades. Although I plan on remaining anonymous for obvious reasons, my goal now is to get this information out to as many people as possible. Please help me spread the word. Hopefully others who attended the meeting back in 1991 will be inspired by this and tell their own stories. Most importantly, if only one life has been touched by my story, I pray it makes the weight of my guilt a little more tolerable. Thank you. Now, like I said, this was something that came out Tuesday, April 24th, 2012. And, this is... There's a lot, right? But basically, to summarize the letter, there is a retired record exec who's coming out anonymously to talk about the rise of gangster rap music and how it was deliberately done in order to inspire the population of people who listen to rap music to be influenced to do the crimes spoken about in the songs, to make it cool and popular, to then get arrested, to then fill up those prisons with those people. And then the label execs and the labels who are invested heavily in the private for-profit prison industry in the United States would get a kickback from that, either from the stocks that they had invested in or the fact that they were silent investors in the actual prisons themselves. A lot of people have had this feeling for a very long time. And I think now more than ever, it's important for us to start to look at certain industries that continuously resemble slavery. To me, that's the music industry. To me, that's the NBA. To me, that's the NFL. And there's a bunch of others. The prison, obviously, industrial complex. This optics thing of the very slim, white, wealthy majority benefiting the most from labor and art done by Black people and Black bodies is something that we have to start paying more and more attention to. A lot of our society is constructed. A lot of what we believe to be true is half-truths or lies. And normally I would take this and say, it sounds good, but, I don't know if I necessarily believe it. But when you add in the horrors as a backdrop, as a foundation, as context of what this country has done, both overtly and covertly to Black people to make sure that we never make it out of a certain positionality, to make sure that we are always second-class citizens, to make sure to always get the labor from us directly and extract the labor and extract the profit from our bodies doing work directly, this starts to paint a completely different picture. This starts to paint a different picture of the Durk situation, of the Thug situation, of all the gangster rap artists that we've had thus far. Now, I will say this. I personally believe that gangster rap music came out of a necessity, came out of people speaking on what they were seeing on their day-to-day. But I think the plot started to get more and more lost as this became more and more profitable. And now you're having people who grew up in the suburbs claiming to be gangsters. I think Offset is one of those people. You know what I mean? I think that we have to start investigating this. We have to start thinking about it. I'm not opposed to gangster rap music. I like it. I'm not opposed to people expressing what their lived experiences are. I like that. I love it. That's what art is. But we have to start thinking about something like this letter in a society that has made it its business to continue to extract labor, extract our life force, extract our creativity, extract our funds from us as a people to keep us down collectively. Because if this is true, they're getting paid 7, 8, 9 different type of ways off of an artist's labor. They're putting these artists into slave contracts. They're deliberately going into the inner city, plucking raw talent, right? making sure that they don't necessarily have the tools to make sure and negotiate that their talent is being respected and they are going to make money off the art that they produce, right? So they're specifically deliberately targeting a specific group of people to get their art and have them do most of the labor, but making sure that they don't have the tools to negotiate well on their behalf. So they're getting a bunch of money from the artist directly in these slave contracts, and Diddy was one of these people. We'll get into that towards the latter half of this episode. Then on top of that, they're making money off the sales. They're making money off the shows. They're making money off the merch, right? They're making money off the fan base. But on top of that, more covertly, what is being popularized and what they're pushing to a specific demographic of people, because they know who typically listens to rap music. It's shifted a lot now. Rap has become pop. That's a whole other video. But you know what I mean. In this time frame, there was a particular substack of people that were into rap music, let alone gangster rap music, right? It was hello, right? So then you're making money off of the private prison that you invested in or as a label, or the stock that you invested in as a label exec or whatever. And you get more money the more people you get to fill up that prison by the artists that you're using to inspire these people to commit crimes and making this look cool. I know it sounds like an old head conspiracy theory. I know it sounds kind of outdated, but in a country that deliberately had the CIA drop crack cocaine into the black community right after Reaganomics, I wouldn't put it past them, is a thing. And then this only gets reified when you notice that there are label execs with stocks in private prisons. Let's see if I can find a video discussing this. Label execs, stocks in private prisons. And I want this to even be clear, because now we're talking about sociological things like slavery by another name, mass incarceration, the prison industrial complex, and how much of American society continues to exist and thrive upon the slavery, upon slave labor, whether it's in other countries, whether it's in the United States. The 13th Amendment has a loophole particularly built in so that they could continue to extract labor and profit from free labor from people who look like us. I have a podcast called Bloodstain where I talk about history through the lens of true crime. Season 1 is all about slavery. And in the latter half, in one of my last episodes, we will be discussing neo-slavery, which fills in the gap from the end of the Civil War into modern times, and how the American government repeatedly was trying to find different ways to continue slavery happening. And one of the best ways to do it was through private prisons, was through prison labor, right? So it gets very cerebral really quick. Like, we're starting with Durk on the individual, and it's like, damn, that sucks. And then you move out and you're like, okay, but what place do gangs have in black culture and hip hop culture, and why is that important, right? Truthfully, why it's important, because we're not the only marginalized community with gangs, but we seem to be the ones that are oftentimes portrayed publicly as gangsters, right? And it isn't just in the music, it's in the news, it's in media, it's in all of these things. Our representation, for the most part, to white America is thugs, welfare queens, dangerous, aggressive, loud, messy, stupid, poor. That is what we are still portrayed as on a high scale, on a high level, right? But when you look at this letter, and you think about how deliberate people have to be in order to create an entire secret economy within the music industry to make money off of these black people 5, 6, 7, 8 different type of ways, and you put that in context of the true history of our people in this country, everything starts to make a lot of sense, right? Let's see. Let's read this. Let's do this.
But it's entertainment. We take entertainment the wrong way. And at the end of the day, all these young brothers dying, right? The record company's getting residuals. The record company getting money. They mama ain't even getting the money to bury these dudes.
Big fact.
But the record company is getting that
They
royalties.
get paid.
Come on.
A lot of people don't know these.
That's a great point. I just want to say also that label execs is with acts like Lil Durk or Chief Keef at his height, when he's discovered, when he's new. He's praised with being authentically gangster. He's praised with all of these accolades, right? But you don't know on the business back end that a lot of these acts that are in that lane, the label is taking life insurance policies off on them. The label is making sure they're signing deals that they get money in perpetuity off them, even if they die young. And as all of these artists start to die young, you have their Nipseys, you have your P&B Rock, you have your XXXTentacion. He was a mess, but you know what I'm saying? These young black men who in the past 5 years, how many of them have been killed in cold blood by their own, right? The label execs are making a bag off of them. They're making a bag off the murder. Okay, so we have to really start to recalibrate us as a black community, especially now, and really engage with that truthfully. There's a reason why the white exec fat cat gets the most money out of these deals, right? And I feel like, honestly, before the labels were these consolidated corporation giants and, there's more smaller labels that were run by different people, either in the community or not in the community or whatever. Like these before like Motown and stuff like that, where it's black people helping black people who maybe do business with white people, but they are the ones finding the talent. They are the ones developing the talent. They are the ones writing the songs. They are the ones in control of the expression. We have to start thinking about where things changed and how this became the norm in the industry when it came to profiting off of blackness and black art and our shit, right? And in that same vein, what kind of new things get added to the equation?
These record companies, when they sign these high-risk artists, they put life insurance policies on them.
Tell you
What did I
this.
say?
Universal Records own shares on a lot of stocks in private prison.
What? Say it one more time. Baby.
Universal Records. Now hold on. I want that nigga write the check on the nigga, but now hold on. But look.
Yeah.
Universal Records had stocks in they had money behind private prisons. Like they was invested in that. Private prisons is for us to go to private prison. They get money off of us, right?
Yeah.
So what better way to fill your private prisons? If I push this negative rap, and they gonna control these kids to do drill, bang your hood, pull out that gun in the video, F these dudes over here, you gonna get in trouble in the streets when they see the video. You kill him, you go to the private prison, who get paid? Universal get a cut of that, and I get your royalties for your rap. I'm getting paid 2 different ways.
7 different ways. Like, I know we love gangster rap. I love it too, and I love to consume it. But can we produce gangster rap ethically to black people outside of these situations, especially as the internet has democratized and decentralized? Like, the labels are on their way out. The labels are using their last death rattle to consolidate themselves to try and self-preserve. But at this stage of the game, there are things like SoundCloud, there are things like YouTube, there are people who are being able to create content around becoming an artist and self-funding and becoming independent, and that's becoming more and more popular. Is there a way to ethically create gangster rap music? I'm not saying it has to be like sunshines, rainbows, da-da-da-da-da. No, it can still be gritty, it can still be real, it can still be based on life experiences. But when you have actual black people at the helm and not black capitalists, that's another conversation. Actual black people at the helm who are trying to do a situation where it's for us, by us, produced by us, benefited by us. People who are actually put in place to put these young artists on game, giving them the proper lawyers, making sure they're getting the right splits, even just consolidating a bunch of independent acts and allowing them to be independent, but also providing, certain things for them in terms of like legal fees and all of that kind of stuff, organization for shows and stuff like that. Decentralizing the rap game outside of these things and into a place where we now have the control and we hold the reins. We have to continue to think about things in industries that optically look like slavery. We have to consider that, right? We have to think about that. We have to, as a Black community, we have to start thinking deeply about some of the things that we consume. Like I said, I love the ratchet shit. I love it. My pussy fat. He's a trick. All of that shit. I love that shit. It's my favorite type of music. But when it's attached to systems like this that are from the depths of hell, that promote slavery to our people just by the fucking system that it's a part of, then I start to like get a little queasy. You know what I mean? Like that letter came out in 2012. Clearly that guy had that experience in 91. Gangster rap started to gain popularity in the early 90s. I believe that's when NWA came out and really put their stamp on it. But if we don't own the means of production of our own art, it's so easily corrupted. In so many ways. And I think that we have to start thinking about that. We need to start using the leverage that we do have. The people in the NFL need to protest. Why are there no Black team owners for real? The people in the NBA need to protest. All of these people need to protest the systems at play and decentralize them so that we can own the means of production of our own labor. It makes no sense that in 2024, there's a bunch of white people owning a team full of Black people, and these people are voting against their interests. Their team's interests. These people are actively, violently racist, and they're getting most of the benefit. They're not putting their body on the line. They're not getting CTE. They're not, working hard to do this. They just have the money to produce it. We need to start talking about it. We do. So when it comes to Durk, you see that he's a product of the situation. He was once an anomaly. He was once the exception, and then he became a statistic because through the generations of all of this bullshit that Black people have gone through, the constant foot of the man on our neck, it creates a mentality that's also dependent in a toxic way on that structure. And we need to dig within and pull that bullshit out. Not saying we can't be violent and aggressive in our music and talk about truth and talk about our experiences. But when you're grooming people to pretend that they're gangsters when they're not, to act like they're about it when they're not, when you have the industry infiltrated by people like Tekashi 6ix9ine, which I will be making a video on too, because I think that speaks a lot to this underscoring. We have to realize that we lost the plot, and we have to kind of come to Jesus and be real, because what are we promoting and who is it working for? Because if that letter is true, all this bullshit about Gunna being a snitch and all this bullshit about YSL and Young Thug and are they cool, are they not cool, what's gangster, what's not gangster to do in these predicaments, people are getting real Fed cases behind this bullshit. And you know who's making money off of them, whether they're working, not working, dead, in the ground, alive, it doesn't matter, in jail, is the white person who's at the top of the company. It's slavery. It's slavery. We have to talk about it. We do. And part of being able to do that is having hard conversations within our community. And meaning that's not necessarily open for the world to see. It's not necessarily something we need to shame people about, because we're all indoctrinated in a specific way. Some of us are further in our unlearning processes than others, but we're all indoctrinated under a certain mentality. Situations like this now, as it has gotten out of hand. It's gotten out of hand. When you're creating murder plots for another rapper's cousin because of this and that, because you're going back and forth killing each other, we have lost the plot. All of you guys are famous. All you guys are making money. What are we actually doing? Why is your ego attached to this? And is it part of what happened in the 90s? Is it part of that concerted effort to target our inner city communities, to popularize this mindset? Because back in the day, like NWA, it was gangster rap, but it was political. It was anti-establishment. It was punk rock. It was all of those things. It was counterculture. It was uplifting Blackness at the core of it. Now it's Waukesha. Now it's shoot him in the head. Now it's I don't give a fuck about their life. It's not about fuck the police anymore, which is fuck the system. It's about all of these other things. Rap is inherently political. And the further we stray from that, the further lost we become as a society. And when you have these systems at play, the systems that made Lil Durk a victim, you start to see how it's just a positive feedback loop that just continues to continue. And we need to step in and say, you know what? No. And part of that is having hard conversations. Durk may have been talented, but he was dumb as fuck for letting his ego get in the way of a success that he should have never seen. You know what I mean? There weren't the right people in his corner, right? That leads me to the next part of this, right? The Joe Budden podcast talked about this a little bit. Maybe actually I want to have Ice-T talk about it. Let's have him.
Who benefits and profits off our bickering and our division? You know, it's like follow the money. I don't know their names, Bill, but if you follow the money, you go high enough, you start to see, okay, you know, this is an industry. Okay, let's take rap music.
Let's take it.
Same people who own the labels own the prisons. So
Literally the same people?
literally the same people who own the labels own private prisons. So, you know, it seems really kind of suspicious, if you want to say that word, that, you know, the records that come out are really geared to push people towards that prison industry.
But they didn't make you write those lyrics.
It's not about making somebody write the lyrics. It's about being there as guardrails to make sure certain songs make it through and certain songs don't. Certain flavors are exposed on the record. You know, some records are made by committee, meaning record company guys sit around and tell the artists, this is hot, say that, do this. We're going to have this guy write the lyrics. We're going to have that. So the narrative is really kind of, you know, structured and really made into what the record company want the record to be and what the, you know, a lot of
Ciao. And this is coming from Ice Cube. Ice Cube is literally named as one of the founders of gangster rap as a genre. And for him to say that, I mean, some of the best sociologists are Black people in the inner city, period. Some of the smartest people who can tell you exactly how it works, exactly how this country is, are just people who live and see the ugly face of America every single day of their fucking life. You don't have to go to school for this shit. You just have to be woke. You just have to keep your head on a swivel and be able to deduce what's actually going on behind the scenes. The reason why people say listen to Black women, the reason why books like Parable of the Sower and people like Octavia Butler are thought to be prophetesses because they are able to see the future, is simply because they're looking at the cards and they're deducing based on the way things are going how they will likely end, right? This leads me to this idea of gatekeepers and people in the industry. The gatekeepers sold out. They sold their holes, literally. Diddy. You know what I'm saying? The gatekeepers sold out, and this brings me to like my idea of Black capitalism and why I don't necessarily believe in it in terms of the way that it's been showed to us, right? I think Black capitalism is a statement that's mutually exclusive because no matter what, capitalism, the capitalist system, will move the goalposts in favor of whiteness. Capitalism and whiteness and white supremacy work like this. It is just a manifestation, a economic ideology of white supremacy. So when a black person like Diddy or Jay-Z or whatever amass massive amount of wealth and they're homies with, the owners of this and the owners of that, and they're getting these opportunities, they then throw it back at you and brand it as, look at me, I'm a black-owned business. Look at all the success as a black man in America that I've achieved, without understanding that this is part of the play. Now we can point to you. Right? Now we can point to you and say, hey, we're not racist because look at Jay-Z, look at Diddy, look at the people at the top of this. When we all know that capitalism in its function is based on slave labor, which in effect demonizes and criminalizes black people in order to continue to chug along. So if there is a Diddy or if there is a Jay-Z, that doesn't mean that any black person can do it. It means that the system let them in to modernize it for the time, but those ranks are closed. There's only going to be 2 at the top or 1 at the top. There can't be a million of you at the top because that defeats the purpose of the prisons and the slave labor and what you're supposed to be doing, which is being a fucking slave. You know what I mean? And so when you have black capitalists like Diddy or Jay-Z, and I'm using them specifically because we're talking about the music industry. We can talk about entertainment. We can talk about a bunch of shit, but I'm using them specifically because we're talking about the music industry, specifically hip hop. And that's when they came up. These people sold their wholes, and their souls in order to be the exception. They did the things that the people before them were not necessarily willing to do, so they could reach new heights that no one had reached before. That being said, though, they are completely invested in everything staying the same, because if things became equitable and if we started to dismantle capitalism as a whole, black capitalism as a whole, what they're trying to sell us as black capitalism and how we can all have it. Because look where Diddy came from and look where Jay-Z came from. Not talking about the favors and the things done behind the scenes to ensure that positionality. What ends up happening is if things are dismantled, they are no longer exceptional. They are no longer the exception. They are no longer the top of many. They are no longer the billionaire. They have to be regular like the rest of us. These people are not invested in dismantling the very systems that allow prison slave labor, the very systems that produce the conditions to continue to fill that prison slave labor by way of inspiring people to make certain types of music and do certain types of things publicly. They are very much invested in the status quo staying the same, because without it staying the same, then they are no longer exceptional. So we need to be very wary of people who we place, put our money in, put our inspiration into, and really see where they stand when it comes to black issues, where they stand when it comes to the people, being empowering to the people. I'm not saying people shouldn't be successful. I'm not saying that, these men weren't talented or whatever. What I am saying, though, is the structures at play, what they're trying to sell you and convince you to buy with them versus with them, and I'm black and all of this stuff, what they're branding on, especially now as the idea of a billionaire is becoming more and more passe and more people are recognizing that really no good people are able to become billionaires because of what it takes to amass $1 billion in this country that's so hateful and capitalistic centered. When people are starting to get hip to that, now I'm Basquiat in terms of Jay-Z. I'm for the people. I'm putting rappers on the biggest stage in America during the Super Bowl. I'm doing this. I'm doing that, right? I'm undermining a protest that's important by Kaepernick in order to, make a look for myself. I'm helping. I'm doing this. When in actuality, they're just enriching and branding and making sure to brainwash you to continue to spend your money with them against your best interests. And that's kind of what was being spoken on the Joe Budden podcast. They were talking about this idea that, like, Jaywan, who's Jadakiss' son. I don't know if it's Jadakiss, but Jaywan, the young guy who's the rapper's son, and Joe were going back and forth when the Lil Durk indictment came out in late October. And basically, on J1's front, he was saying there's no gatekeepers guiding these men. There's no people in the industry coming in to help guide these men to make better decisions. And then Joe's take was, yeah, but by the time they get to the industry, these men have been so conditioned by their situation, by where they grew up and all of that, that they have 5, 10, 15 bodies under their belt. And as an old head who has things to lose now, I don't want to get entangled with a random young kid who has all of this liability attached to their existence because of the violence that they're a part of. Both are true. Both are true. They were going back and forth to see which one was true. Both are true. Both are true. But until you take a step back and understand that there's a bigger system at play that's deliberately causing this dynamic to happen, it's all connected. It's all connected to continue to leave us without leaders, with guidance that will help us, give us tools to liberation. We're seeing a bunch of young people get killed and gunned down by their own. We're also seeing a lot of older people in hip hop dying with things like health, drug addiction, all sorts of things. Historians of the culture. Hip hop wasn't just rap music. It was a bunch of stuff. But like I said, it's always been inherently political. And so as things kind of move more and more away from the politic, more and more away from the party music, more and more away from the good time, and more into more violent, more aggressive spaces. With the context of a letter like this, we have to start thinking about it. I'm not one of those people that's like, abolish all of this stuff, because the truth is they are speaking to a real experience. They are. But in this day and age, I think it's getting weirder and weirder that they're speaking to white people now. In this day and age, I think it's getting weirder and weirder that the politics have been stripped from hip hop, and it's just drug, sex, kill, shoot music. Like I said, I do indulge, but there used to be politics. There used to be a way to talk about these things that was more reflective of a real situation. And as more and more things get more contrived, and we're seeing kind of this just constant conveyor belt of a certain specific type of act that gets promoted by these labels, and how that always ends either in a body bag, in jail, or broke, or on drugs on the street. We have to start thinking about the industry as a whole. We have to start thinking about how we're conditioned to accept slavery as normal. And we have to start, taking Black men in particular to task, because this stuff doesn't happen in a vacuum. Lil Durk's situation is not a situation that's really unique to our inner cities and our Black communities. Father in prison, father dead, lack of guidance and authority in the home, the streets being the only place they find that, and them learning the hard way that isn't a life, that isn't a way to live. You know what I mean? As Black men, you guys have to start allowing us to be critical of you as a community. And this is where I'll end. Y'all really are sensitive. And I don't think you guys realize that. You think the world ends and begins on your ass. And it doesn't. There are stratifications within the Black community, right? Just as we are stratified by race, there are stratifications within those categorizations. There's Black men who have the most privilege in our community because they're also men. There's Black women who are cis het and heterosexual. That's what I'm talking about. Who get privileges because they're not gay or they're not trans. There are homosexual gay men who are still getting privileges because they're men, but they're also gay and they're also Black. And then there's trans people in our community who are arguably, by those stratifications, some of the most disenfranchised. The average age for a Black trans woman is 35 years old in America in 2024. Like, we have to be fucking for real. And until we stop centering Black men and start centering the most marginalized groups in our community, Black children, the disabled, people who are trans, people who are elderly, people who are poor, people who are drug addicts, until we center the movement around their experiences, we will forever be in this positionality. We need to understand that a high tide raises all ships. And what's stopping that is Black men want us to stop at being Black. stop at being Black. They don't understand the intersections of all of our identities and how that creates very specific circumstances of oppression. And that's what I mean. A call in, not a call out. Black men, you are not the most marginalized. Everything you go through, all of us in the community go through that as well, except for we don't also have the privilege to subjugate each other. Black women are subjugated by Black men because they're not men and they're also women. So there's the patriarchal aspect and the racial aspect. Then you get into, Black queer people who are subjugated by Black men and Black women who are straight. And then you get into the Black trans people who are subjugated by Black men, Black women, queer Black men, queer Black women who are cis het. You know what I'm saying? Like, the stratifications go deep, and until we get smart and realize that centering the most vulnerable as the center of the movement, who we're fighting for and trying to build solutions for and build community around, we will always face this bullshit. Because you guys want us to coddle and baby and continue like your problems aren't problems that we are not all experiencing. The prison industrial complex works. It doesn't discriminate over, sexual orientation or gender. It works the same. It works the same for the same purpose. You're not the only people being gunned down by police. You're not the only people getting sent to jail. You're not the only people in your community who are doing that and experiencing that, right? So it's important that the ego gets taken out of it. The babying gets removed from it. And it's time for you guys to stand the fuck up for the most vulnerable people in your community. That is what a man is. In these times, we need to refocus. We need to recenter. We need to get real about our circumstances and build that community quick. Because what's happening is, in my mind, Trump is hyper-focused on the trans issue, Trump hyper-focused on the immigration issue. But when those two issues get kind of, handled in this administration, however they're going to handle it, the issue is going to turn right back to the Black community and to the indigenous community, as it always does. We need to be ready to fight for ours, to fight for what little we've gained and be able to use the instability in our favor to gain more and to change the world. So now more than ever, I'm not hearing the babying. I'm not going to walk on eggshells. You all need to not only hold yourselves accountable, but you need to hold each other accountable. Meaning your drug addict friend, your rapist friend, your misogynistic friend, the friend that's abusive that beats on his girl. These are not acceptable things any longer. You need to start protecting the essence and the purity of Blackness right now more than ever. And we need to start figuring out ways to change the circumstances, use our leverage in these very specific industries that resemble slavery in order to dismantle them and bring them back into our control. I don't really have much more to say. All I have to say really is I'm sorry to Durk. And in his circumstances, I can't imagine what that must feel like. But also, this is part of being held accountable. You can't do wrong and be a menace to society without reaping the consequences. And now more than ever, it's time for us to act the fuck right and to get it the fuck together. Seriously. It's time to cut the dead weight, time to cut the problematic bullshit, and really get in formation to protect our own. Period. Point blank, period. And that's where I'll end this. I'm glad I re-recorded this because I think this tone is much better and more informative. And I think it was just a better video, more coherent. That being said, Black Lives Matter, Free Palestine until it's backwards. Obviously, the link in the bio to the podcast, to the link tree in the bio will link you to all my social media. Please consider subscribing to the channel, of course, liking, subscribing, putting that bell notification on so you know when I post. I do these one-off videos. I'm trying to do more of them. And I think when I'm on hiatus from the podcast, I'm going to do more. But consider subscribing to my Substack. There's a free tier. There's a paid tier, $5 a month, $50 for the entire year. If you're in the paid tier, I'm reacting to slave movies right now. It's like an in tandem series that goes with my Bloodstained podcast. So get into that if you're interested. We're going to be starting a book club come January 2025. We're going to be reading Parable of the Sower as well as Parable of the Talents, which is very important in this time frame. So if you're interested in any of that, you don't have to be a part of the paid tier to be a part of the book club. You can be a part of the free tier. More information coming out shortly. First meeting in January 2025. Follow me on TikTok. Follow me on Instagram. All of the things. Mwah. I love you guys so much. Thank you. Goodbye.